Washington's young playmakers shined on Saturday.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Lars, quick heads up to all the everydayers before we get going. Make sure wherever you're getting this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, you're clicking like on this video, clicking that subscribe button and that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. And if you're audio only, leave us a 5-star review. All that stuff really does help us out a lot because we've got so much fun stuff coming from every spring practice. Today, as we're recording this on Saturday, we just got back from the 6th spring practice, got a whole bunch of notes from it. We're going to talk about some of the defensive standouts that we saw, a couple of agenda guys for both of us that we'll get into. But Lars, one thing about this team is certain. People are going to sit there and, until they see it on the field against another team, say, hey, is this team physical enough? Are they big enough? Can they win at the line of scrimmage? One thing is certain, there are so many playmakers on this team.
Yeah, well, and it starts, honestly, with Damon Williams. Like, everything goes off of Damon. Now, yes, Theoretically, it starts with the offensive line, but the point in this is it really starts with Damon, where we saw him break off for a 50-yard scramble, and when I put that out on Twitter, I added casual just because it wasn't really until he got to about, I want to say, like the 25, 30, where it really, like, he kicked into high gear, and it was like, see, like, even in a game, like, Damon's still pulling away, and you could actually see that breakaway speed. I remember looking over at you saying, hey, like, that's the breakaway speed that Jed says is the fastest on the team. But you can kind of see the argument being there. And then also at the same point, Damon's ability to find guys at all three levels of the field as a passer, like, it's all there. And then you have, of course, the playmakers to be there, as we're talking about. But everything is just like all the pieces are there. It's kind of frustrating where you still got to wait until fall camp and then really the season to get going before you can actually see it. But it's just the talent covered is not even close to tapped into yet, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I wanted to check my notes here real fast, but it is all about Damon, right? Where it's not even just the run where he beat, I want to say one guy on the play where he really only needed to beat one person, where Rashid Williams made a nice block where as Damon rolled out, he just kind of called for it, gave him a lane, and he did a great job of accelerating and beating whoever else was on the field. But it wasn't just that, where we see the legs. You and I have talked about the athleticism and everything that he brings, but it's the arm talent as well. There was a play earlier on, so I want to check my notes, where he was looking for Chris Lawson about 45, 50 yards down the field, and he threw a dime. And Lawson was there in double coverage, and Damon made a really nice throw. He just wasn't able to haul it in as he kind of fell down to the ground. And you look at that and you say, more time, more chemistry, you're going to get those things right. And with some of these young freshmen, those are things that are going to sort themselves out over a longer period of time, right? But it wasn't just that. The guy who, as the everydayers are very, very familiar with, we are very, very high on this podcast, was Justice Williams. Justice Williams had a tremendous day. He was running a post route towards the sideline, made a really nice grab from Kai Horton. He made the play of the day where he's running a go route and lays out between two defenders. Looked like he was able to pull it in. I think he knocked the wind out of himself because he stayed down on the field for a minute or so, but then popped right up and was okay. And later on in practice, made a touchdown grab. I want to say it was from Damon Williams, where no, sorry, it was from Kai Horton, 13-yard touchdown grab where he went up and over Darian Clemens and just looked like a fade route and just beat him, took the ball away over the top. And, we've talked ad nauseum about one of these young receivers finding a way to step up. Rashid Williams continues to make plays day in and day out. Nothing, spectacular like that, but he's been very, very consistent. And especially as Omar Evans has missed a couple of days now, Raiden Vinespread has missed a couple of days now, you're looking for some of these guys to step up. And seeing that, especially with Justice, who has the size, the speed, all the intangibles, seeing him start to make plays on the field is really, really exciting.
Yeah, he's also got the pedigree, the bloodline. When you talk about, and again, it's partially a stigma in a sense of, oh, your dad played in the NFL, you must be good. It's like, well, no, not necessarily, but he's truly kind of giving us a sense of like, okay, when we were talking about him coming out of high school, like, man, you can really see it. Then the injury happens and it's like, dang, like, did that set him back, or was it kind of almost just allowing him a sense to be a freshman for a year and get, acclimated to football, the knowledge of the offense? And I think that honestly might actually have helped him long term, because you get to soak up the system for a year from the playbook perspective, the classroom, go look at tape and things like that. Even though you're not watching yourself, when you get on the field, that's why he's able to be in position and bring in balls and contested catches, because he knows where to be on the field because he's put that time in on the film room. I guarantee you he has. We haven't had a chance to talk with him at all. I don't think we probably will for safe to say at least
a little while.
12 months to at least probably 18 months if I'm being conservative there. But with that being said, it's just a guy where honestly that timeline could be shorter just because we're seeing him make play after play after play. And same thing with Chris Lawson, where that is kind of like the guy that got lost in the shuffle in the 2024-25 class, where Marcus Harris, the hype coming from Oklahoma and the 4-star right before signing day, and Braden Weinbreit from IMG, and you just go down the list and it's Chris Lawson is a 4-star right there. Like, Oregon wanted them, and you look at it and think, like, there's a reason why he was highly coveted, and that's the reason why we were so excited about him at the time. And then, it's like, well, that was June, July when we talked about his commitment, and now it's August or April of the next year, I should say. A little bit of time in between there, shall we say. So one of the guys that gets lost in translation, but then you watch him, and every single day of practice, I mean, aside from the first two, just a guy who's just making play after play. And so you look at both those guys, where how many snaps and targets do they end up getting this season with Denzel, and if Omar is able to, come back, be healthy by the start of the season and all that, maybe they don't get the most targets, but they're going to find a way in this offense one way or another.
Oh, absolutely. Where when you talk about finding a way, you talk about this running back position, where whoever is going to get carries there, we know what obviously what the top end is going to look like with Jonah Coleman, and then Adam Mohammed right behind him. I say whoever is going to get carries because we saw Julian McMahon make a couple of nice plays today. He did, also have a fumble. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we saw him make a really nice play on the goal line where it's a simple, just shotgun toss play to the left. And he just took it in for a 4-yard touchdown. And we were talking with some of our buddies, would be, Andy Yamashita at the Seattle Times, Christian Capel over at Odd Montlake. And it was just, hey, he's got one particular job right now, and it's to be a bowling ball. And it's very exciting to think about this offense, because you just look at that stable, that rotation of running backs, and he's somebody who might not factor in this season, but I feel like, we all knew what some of the other backs are going to look like this spring, right? We know what Jonah Coleman is. We know what Adam Mohammed is. And even to an extent, even though we didn't see him much, we know what Jordan Washington was. And we saw Julian McMahon as soon as he came in here, just, whoa, that dude is every bit of 6'2", 230. And it's one of those things where as this room continues to develop and it continues to evolve, we know, Jonah's moving on after the season. You just look at what's waiting in the wings and you say, yeah, I'm really excited about that at basically every position, where the young offensive linemen continue to develop day in and day out. But especially, when I look at running back, I say that room is in very good hands.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the thing that popped into my eyes right away when you looked at his bio, 6'2", 225, whatever. And I remember asking Scotty Graham at the preseason, pre-spring camp sort of thing, like, Julian going to find his way on the field just based on that size? Again, you can only coach size to a certain degree. And I think it was honestly impressive to see how well he carries that way. Because you look at some guys like, hey, he's a bowling ball, but he still can move, especially because, like you mentioned, it was a toss out to the boundary. It's not a speed option into the boundary. Just, it's a toss outside, shall we say. But he's able to get upfield, find the corner of the end zone, and didn't look like he was panicking. Didn't seem like a kid who's, wow, like kind of a freshman moment. We haven't really seen that. We did see that on the fumble, which we'll again get to in a minute here. But all in all, you just look at the depth and health in that running back room, short and long term. Yeah, Julian McMahon probably is going to play 3 to 4 games, right? Sure, maybe 5 again, depending on how it factors out. But the guy you don't need this season, but you need him you need that type of guy to come in as a freshman. So by your sophomore year, getting some touches next year, junior year, boom, now we're running. That's the type of stable that you want to build that Scotty Graham is building towards.
Lars, with that being said, let's flip sides and let's talk about the defense. Right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. Lars, we talked about the offensive play of the day going to Justice Williams. The defensive play of the day, I think, also goes to a true freshman in Rylon Dillard-Allen. There was a play where it was a jet sweep to Marcus Harris on, I want to say it was the 5-year, no, it was on the 10-yard line, and comes across formation, and he looked like he has a clear lane to the end zone. You and I spent a lot of time talking about Rylon Dillard-Allen and what kind of upside he has as an athlete. And he was playing free safety over the top, and he closed on him in the blink of an eye and made a really nice, very physical tackle to take him out where, again, it looked like he had a clear lane to the end zone, and he took him out like that. It was such a nice play to just see the angle that he took. It was just a really mature play in terms of not just the angle, not just going for a big hit, but finding a way to close quickly and make sure he didn't get into the end zone.
Yeah, it was a prime example of being able to validate exactly what he told me when I got to interview him about a month ago now. Check out that interview on Locked On Huskies, by the way, where he talked about the coaching staff said, like, hey, you're going to play as a freshman. And I think, okay, wow, already almost guaranteed playing even before you see a snap and spring ball. And then you've seen him and it's like, oh, that's why. Like there's certain guys where, again, you can tell they've had either high-level coaching or they just already think at an advanced level, where I'm not saying it's Eli Bolden, but you just look at, when he came in, the same kind of level of mental approach where you can see guys, a freshman usually doesn't make that angle, where we saw plenty of freshman safeties last spring. Not all of them made that play. Really, I don't think many of them did. That's why you go and get Rylon Dillard-Allen. That's why you go and fight Alabama and a few other schools for his commitment. Because when you stack that type of talent as a freshman and then you bring in whoever you get in the 25 class and you just add that talent on top of that, that's a guy where, whether it's special teams or as a backup role at safety, Ryan Walters is going to find a way to get him on the field. Like, that is probably if there's a locked-on bet that you could just take to the bank, cash out right now, it's Rylon Dillard-Allen finding a way on defense this season.
No, I absolutely agree. And that's the thing where, let's talk about the safety room for a minute, because I've been really impressed with what I've seen from it. Paul Menke had an interception today on a poor throw from Kai Horton that he just undercut and made a nice play on the ball. But it's one of those things where we've seen really nice competition at safety. We've seen Vincent Holmes make some plays. I know Rashawn Clark is a nickel. He came in as a safety, and he's made all kinds of plays. But the more I look around that room, I've just been very impressed with the talent. And you and I were on here saying, hey, Peyton Waters was one of the biggest losses that you saw, or just from this team in the transfer portal period. But it was because of this. It was because there was so much talent. And we said it. We said somebody had to leave that room. We didn't necessarily think he was going to be the first name out the door, but I look at that position and I say, I'm very just confident in where it's going to be moving forward. And a big reason for that is a guy you and I really like is Alex McLaughlin. Alex McLaughlin saw his first reps, and even then it was limited with the first team defense today. Like that's just how talented this safety position has been, with McEllisteen and CJ Christian being, the penciled in starters as of right now. But he had a really nice, pass breakup that I want to mention, where he undercut a ball for Decker DeGraaf, just a really nice play on the ball. And he also had a punch out on Julian McMahon that caused him to run a couple of laps, where I've just been so impressed with him. And the fact that right now he's been fighting for a spot on the second team with Rylon Dillard-Allen, with Vincent Holmes, I think speaks more to where this room is right now than it does his talent.
No, I mean, that's a fair assessment. And I think also, I mean, not that I don't like Alex McLaughlin, but the guy that, that stands out the most to me is CJ Christian. And when you talk about the transfer portal, take it away, it does also give it away. And I think that's why it was important to go and get two safeties where you're not just getting Alex McLaughlin or CJ Christian, because they are two different types of safeties. We're worth kind of clarifying that. But CJ is just a guy where he's always going to find the ball Alex is the guy who can come down but also do some coverage. And I think you're just looking at that thinking, well, if you're going to have two starting safeties, but you're going to need that depth there. Where we've seen that in the Big Ten, really at any position, you want to have two other guys who can basically be your 1A, 1B, and that's why you go and get Alex McLaughlin. Whether it's CJ or Alex starting, pick one or the other. They're both all going to find time. That's what really intrigues me about how do you get to that fifth guy, whether it's Vincent Holmes, whether it's, throw in any of those other young guys that you want to mention that we've already talked about. How does that kind of level in the room kind of get worked in? Because that's where the depth really starts to matter. Where sometimes when you have injuries come into play, those guys that are like, hey, well, if I'm number 6 or 7 on the depth chart, maybe I should transfer. I'm not naming any names, but you could just go down to any position in any school and say that. Where if you're not in the 2 deep, what are you doing? And it's, well, you got to find a way to make sure that depth still maintains so you can have that continued long-term stability at safety, especially.
So I love where you're going with there. Sorry, I wanted to move on because another person who just stood out in the same light as just some of these safeties to me was Buddah Al-Uqdah, where we've talked about him a little bit in terms of the interceptions and the turnovers, what he's been able to do with his ball skills, but he's just so physical. Where one of the drills that they've done a couple practices in a row now is something where it's an offensive lineman or a tight end or somebody versus a defensive lineman or a linebacker, and it's all about just setting the edge and controlling the run, where backs are told to either go inside or outside, supposed to follow the block and make sure they can get around there's a linebacker or a defensive lineman and then a defensive back who are supposed to come in and just combine and make sure you make a tackle. And Buddah Al-Uqdah is so physical in the way he takes on blocks, where it's something you and I talked about after the first practice or two. It's, you look at him and you say, hey, he looks just like Jonah Coleman does on defense, where he's a little bit undersized, but he's big, he's strong, he's physical. And it's something where I'm sure people will say, well, you need the big physical linebackers that look like X-Ray Alexander. But then you watch the way that we talked about this in the way Jacob Manu takes on blocks as well, how both those guys just aggressively will come downhill and not just take on, but destroy some of these blocks and clear the way for somebody else to make the tackle or still get back there and make the tackle themselves. I was so impressed with that. And I think, when I think about what this Ryan Walters defense needs, it's somebody just like that.
Absolutely. And I think also it's worth noting, being at what to do with Jake Dicker's defense, the linebacker was such an essential role. Like Jake, if there was probably one position outside of a quarterback and the obvious positions that Jake would care about, he would tell you it's linebacker. And everyone, a lot of people say, hey, what about the missed tackles? I think that's more, the more you think about a combination of maybe scheme and other talent around Buddah last season, where you're kind of, the role that he's playing at Washington is almost perfectly suited for the type of player that he is. And obviously being a California kid, it's like, hey, I wanted to go to Washington anyways coming out of high school. It didn't work out. Now I get to fulfill what I should have done in the first place. He didn't say those words exactly, but just, kind of repackaging something what he said there. But you look at it and think that's why Ryan Walters' addition is so, because he knows how to use guys in the Big Ten. Like, hey, I need X and I need Buddah. It's not just having one or the other, because while one or the other would be great, like stand alone, if you just had X-Ray Alexander and you didn't have Buddah Al-Uqdah, okay, cool. Like, still great addition. But having both of them together, I think, opens up the door for so much intrigue and so many combinations where you're talking about the 4-man, 5-man fronts, maybe even a 3-down, which you had 3. There's so many different ways I think that Ryan Walters can use the packages at linebacker, especially. I mean, one thing worth even noting, like 2 different types of edge rushers we've seen today: Deshaun Lynch and Hayden Moore. 2 different completely types of guys, but both guys that come off the edge on different types of packages. There's so much that intrigues me about this defense. We've seen it at times. We saw it today where Damon had to step up in the pocket. Kai got pressured on some throws. Even Dash, again, working with the third team, still, has your younger offensive linemen are going to be a little rougher. But, you're still looking and thinking, wow, like this defensive line is really holding its own and giving, again, it's a good challenge to the offensive line, maybe, the next 2 practices to, push back. And then now with the offensive line win today. And then, because that shows that's how you build that healthy competition amongst a, college football playoff team.
So I certainly agree with you there. I want to take it a step further, because something I was saying to you while we were sitting up at the stands watching practice, there is one guy who I have just been really, really impressed with in terms of the way he's grown physically, especially since his commitment, and that's Jonathan Epperson. I've just been so impressed with watching him, where it's everything you just talked about in terms of the versatility, the athleticism, the way you're able to move him around and do different things with him. Where when he committed and when he signed, it was, hey, is he going to be a linebacker? Is he going to be a safety? And obviously, we'll see how that works out with him and Donovan Robinson, who is listed as a safety on the roster moving forward. But the more I watch him, the more you see the strength, where he went one-on-one with Julian McMahon today on the goal line when just in one of those one-on-one little drills, and he stood him up. It's really, really impressive watching that added physicality. And it's something where, you talk about just finding different ways to get in the rotation and get different guys on the field. He's certainly one of them, where depending on what does happen with Jacob Manu, if he does play, if he does end up, having to redshirt, having a guy like that in the rotation alongside Zydrunas Brady-Saleh as he continues to get healthy, if you want to walk Jonathan Epperson down, if you want to maybe find a way to get Devin Bryant on the field a little bit more, there's so many different ways to make this work. And there's so much talent and so much physicality at the position. And Lars, that was one thing that stood out to me at Saturday's practice. There are a whole lot of other ones that we need to get to. Right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Lars, what else stood out to you on the field on Saturday?
Well, anytime you can get a solid amount of scrimmaging in and get the special teams involved, I do think I want to spend this right now, like 30 seconds. Grady Gross made both from 40 plus, and I think it's worth noting, when he ran out there, I was like, is that a different kicker than Grady, or is that Grady? I don't know, maybe Grady looks a little slimmer, not a huge amount of difference. It's not like he, Brock Lesnar out there and drastically changed his appearance, and it's no slight of Grady, but just, I don't know, he just looked more confident, and maybe it's a byproduct of having when we talked to Jordan Pepa today, we both kind of read, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's many special teams questions. Don't ask about, certain punter. And it's like, and I think it's a byproduct of, everything is now coming together. Maybe Grady is just getting a fresh set of eyes, and that's helping. And also we're noting, again, it is practice, so maybe it's not a block drill, it's just a prevent drill or whatever, anything like that. But Grady making both from 40 plus, maybe it's your basic Seattle weather, overcast, a little bit of sprinkle rain, 40s, a little bit of wind, but not drastically that bad. But it's, again, I think it's just a good confidence builder where you can see Grady, pay off. They had the little hype, getting rowdy, not too much, not the whole pressuring around him. Just kind of a good little confidence practice for Grady.
No, I agree. And it's something where we've seen him be pretty consistent so far this spring, where this is the first time I can remember him kicking the stadium. I don't think he did a whole lot of that during the first Saturday practice, but it's nice to see him continue to build up that confidence, having, two special teams, one is an analyst and one being the coordinator. Two special teams coaches really helps him out. And, an improved offensive line certainly helps out a lot there. But having somebody like Greg Froelich, who our buddy Jake Butt talked about on this podcast, is somebody who has done a really nice job with kickers and punters throughout his career. Obviously, Grady only does one of those jobs, but just having somebody to help out with that role is something that's going to be important moving forward. And it's going to be something to, just to keep an eye on as we get into the season, because it's not going to matter till the lights are on. Right? Where he can make every kick in practice, but if he misses some in the game, fans are going to be, what fans are going to do. So that's a different conversation for a different day. But one guy I wanted to mention I spent a lot of time last week talking about the defensive line, and somebody who I've been really high on, and we saw get into the backfield for a sack today, was Omar Khan. I remember asking Jason Kafusi about what Omar Khan brings to the table on Thursday, and he compared him to Logan Sagapolu, not in terms of his role, but just in terms of what he wanted to see him improve on. And one of the big things was pass rush. And there was a point today where he made a really nice kind of rip move, if I remember correctly, on the guard that he was going up against and got into the backfield and got, I always put in air quotes on Huskies Wire, a sack, because you're not touching the quarterback. Whatever happens, what ended up happening. But got into the backfield and would have certainly swallowed up whoever the quarterback was on the play. And I just thought about that in terms of what this defensive line needs. It needs a whole bunch of guys to do a job. And that's exactly what we've seen so far from a whole lot of these different guys is just take up blocks and compete and win one-on-ones here and there from, whether it be Ontario Thompson, Simote Pepa here and there. He looked really good. I liked what I saw from his athleticism on the field on Saturday. Bryce Butler being another one, Elenius Davis. And I think if he can really just step up and be a contributor as a pass rusher just a little bit while continuing to refine himself as a run defender, I think he could be a really nice piece for this defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You kind of went through most of the names. So the other two that you mentioned that stood out to me was Simote Pepa and God, why am I trying to know one that you just mentioned?
Bryce Butler was one of them.
No, it was Elenius Davis putting the E in enforcer. Elenius puts the E in enforcer where he made kind of a similar play where he just right at the point of attack. Yeah, probably like a 1 or 2 yard loss on the play. And it's, again, you're talking about, you can't necessarily say there's going to be 1 or 2 guys like, hey, like that's your guaranteed starting. You have so many options to kind of go with. And similar to Simote Pepa, when he ran on the field wearing big 77, it's almost like an offensive lineman is like, wait, is that Max McCree running on the field, or is that Simote
right?
Pepa? Not that Max is that big. Don't get me wrong. There is still a size gap there between those two. But you just look and think it's like, yeah, he can. I would not have guessed that he's 3'4". I mean, I thought he, big guy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's, pushing 300. He's certainly over 300. But you just look and think, man, he can move with that size. That is a massive game because you talk about, winning your one-on-ones. 6'2", 230, 240. I think you said who was the other one that said he was around 240? Logan said he was around 244 or 344.
344, yeah.
He made that joke. He was like, no, not 244, 344. That was Kabusi made that joke. So with Pepa and with a bunch of other guys that you just mentioned, that laundry list of guys, that's a good problem to have. You don't necessarily have one guaranteed guy, but that rotation is exactly what you need in the Big Ten.
No, absolutely. That's something where it gives me hope going into the next season where, we spent a lot of time, and certainly for anybody who's been able to come out and spring practice, notice that it's bigger, it's stronger, it's deeper. It's everything you need from a Big Ten defensive line. And we've made this point before. Is it going to be an elite defensive line? Probably not. It's not going to be one that's going to be, wreaking havoc every time a quarterback drops back to pass. But if you can find a way to be consistent and be just simply average to above average with the way the secondary is going to be playing behind you, especially when you think about Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock, what we've seen from that duo before when they played together and what they could be if both are healthy and playing at full strength in this Ryan Walters defense, it's going to be just exactly what you look for. Lars, before we get out of here, I feel like we need to spend a minute or two on the tight ends. Because that's one thing that, we've spent some time on what that group looks like now that it's going to be a little bit healthier, right? A little bit deeper, and not have 2 guys at the position for the majority of the season. You hope, knock on wood, since we are sitting here in April. But we got a chance to talk to Decker DeGraaf today. And this is something that we posted a little over on YouTube, on Instagram, Twitter, all our from social media, where I asked Decker DeGraaf, hey, where do you feel that you've grown the most in your game? He talked about blocking, but one thing really stood out to me where I really enjoy the chances we get to talk to Decker. Very respectful kid who is always very, very upfront and honest with his answers. The last thing he said on that was, I feel like I'm a really great player. And I respect the confidence that he had in that answer, but I look at what his role is going to be in this offense now that Jordan Paopao and him confirmed that he's at 245 pounds and what he can be as a blocker. If he can just have a bigger role in this offense, I think, to bring it back around, talk about young playmakers, right? He is one of those guys. We saw it last season, and getting a chance to see more of that this year, just along with all these young receivers, is just so exciting to think about.
It's exciting to think about. He's got 2 whole years to be tight end 1. And that's no shot at Quentin Moore. That's just you look and think, man, by the time he gets to the end of his junior season, we're not talking about him at tight end 1 just to UW. We're talking about tight end 1 potentially going to the NFL draft. Like, he just has that size, that ability, the coachability, I think, as well. And we saw it last season where, again, plus or minus, call it 5 yards between Damon finding Decker at Penn State and a couple of others. Damon and Decker's stat lines look a lot different. And now we're talking about, hey, Decker already was getting first-team recognition. Now he's maybe preseason, second team, tight end, or third team tight end. And by the end of the season, maybe he's second team or third team. And then going into next season, he's preseason first team. And and here's the thing. That's why when you said, like, it's confidence, it's like, it's not so accurate. Like, it'd be kind of reprehensible of Decker to be like, I'm still not really that good. I need to, kind of work on this. Like, he gave the stock answer because I remember I looked over, he's like, well, I need to improve everything. And I'm like, I get it. But, it's like, again, which is, again, the correct answer. And again, as Jed would agree, it's, exactly what he should say. But also, again, speaks to Jordan Pepa. And another worth noting before we get out of here, Cade Otton was to practice, former UW tight end, seeing Ryan. And obviously Ryan wasn't able to practice again and things like that. But you just look and think, like, Cade Eldridge, all the guys coming back, Decker obviously not being the one Washington State guy. But you just look and think, like, I think even because he's the one Cali guy, he's almost like, you know what, I value it even more. Like, think about Landon Murray coming to Washington from Ohio. Like, hey, I watched Drew Sample. I want to live up to that Washington tight end mold.
So I like where you're going with that. The one other thing I wanted to mention, but just while we're on the tight end topic, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring it up was friend of the show, Austin Simmons, got a big shout out from Jordan Pepa today, where he was just asked, hey, how are these guys doing? Who's standing out? And he was just like, I've been really impressed with Austin Simmons. He's picked up the offense really quickly. We like what he brings as a mover, as an athlete. And I thought that was really promising with just, what you want to see from this room moving forward, where having a guy like that, because Jordan said, hey, we'd like to be 4 or 5 deep at tight end, where that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring up his just the comments of having a healthy room and having somebody like that alongside Bear Naone, who's going to be coming in this fall. And, obviously you hope Ryan Otton is healthy. Quentin Moore hasn't practiced much. Jordan Pepa said if they were playing a game this weekend, they feel good about him having a chance to play. So you just look at this deeper room and then bringing in somebody else like that who can pick up the system really quickly and just ingrain himself in the offense is promising just to see what else he might be able to bring to the room moving forward. But Lars, we're going to have so much more on that and everything else surrounding spring practice over the next couple of weeks here on Locked On Huskies. So as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the viewers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. You want to hear more about all of that, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star reviews. It really does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.